10 days had passed since the interrogation began. Zexai looked like a broken shell of his former self. His compound eyes had lost their shine, and his forearms hung limp in their restraints. The medical staff had warned Threnody that continued questioning might cause permanent psychological damage, but the tribunal needed the complete record. "Tell me about the end," she said softly, activating the recording device for the final time. "Tell me about the solar weapon." Zexai's mandibles clicked weakly. "It started with a transmission from Earth's surface. Dr. Rachel Stone, a human, scientist working at something called the Solar Research Institute. She looked ordinary, like all humans do. Brown hair, pale skin, eyes the color of winter ice. Nothing about her suggested she was about to change the nature of warfare forever. What did she say? She thanked me for the opportunity to test their new defensive system. Then she showed me what humans had built while we were fighting their fleets. Zexai's voice was barely above a whisper. A network of satellites surrounding their star. Thousands of them, positioned at precise coordinates to focus solar energy into a coherent beam. Threnady's stylus stopped moving. They had weaponized their sun, not just weaponized. They had turned their star into the largest gun in the galaxy. Stone explained how it worked, speaking in technical terms that my translators could barely process. She was proud of her creation, the way a parent might be proud of their child. The alien commander closed his eyes as the memory surfaced with painful clarity. The weapon was controlled from Earth's surface, from Stone's laboratory. She sat at her console, surrounded by screens showing solar flare patterns and energy calculations. Behind her stood Captain Ben Hayes, a military liaison who watched everything with cold human eyes. What happened next? Stone gave me a demonstration. She targeted one of our unmanned probe ships that had been shadowing the human fleet. The solar beam lasted exactly 3 seconds. When it ended, there was nothing left but empty space and residual radiation. Zexai's breathing became labored as he continued. The energy output was equivalent to our largest capital ship weapons, but amplified 1,000 times. Stone told me the beam could reach any point in the solar system with perfect accuracy. She had turned their sun into a sniper rifle with unlimited ammunition. Surely there were limitations. Power requirements, targeting systems, recharge times. That's what I thought. That's what any rational being would assume. But Stone wasn't finished with her demonstration. She showed me targeting data for every ship in my fleet. Precise coordinates, energy calculations, firing solutions. She had been tracking us since the moment we entered their system. The interrogation room fell silent except for the hum of the air recyclers. Threnody waited as Zexai gathered the strength to continue. Then Hayes stepped forward and told me about something called the Samson Protocol. He said that if Earth fell, if humanity was destroyed, 12 other solar weapons would activate automatically. Unmanned systems positioned around other stars, all programmed to hunt down Vorthak worlds. Mutual assured destruction on a galactic scale. Worse than that. Hayes showed me the targeting list. Not just military installations or government centers. Every Vorthak colony, every civilian habitat, every world where our species existed. The humans had prepared to commit genocide against my entire race rather than allow their children to live as slaves. Zexai's compound eyes reflected the overhead. Lights showing depths of remembered terror. Stone gave me 1 hour to withdraw my fleet from human space. She said the solar weapon would begin systematic destruction of my ships if I refused. But then she offered me something worse than death. What? A choice. She said I could save my fleet by ordering orbital bombardment of Earth cities. She would allow me to kill 10 million humans in exchange for safe passage home. She wanted to see if I was willing to become the same kind of monster that I accused humans of being. Threnody leaned forward. What did you do? I tried to call her bluff. I ordered my flagship to target Earth's major population centers, thinking the humans would surrender rather than watch their world burn. But Stone just smiled the same way Admiral Morrison had smiled, the same way Captain Parker had smiled before he rammed my ship. The alien commander's voice broke as he continued. She told me that humanity had voted. Every adult on Earth, every human in the colonies, every member of their species capable of making a decision. They had chosen extinction over surrender. Stone said they would rather see their world destroyed than allow their children to grow up as slaves. So you withdrew. I had no choice. My fleet was outnumbered, outgunned, and facing an enemy that treated mutual destruction as the acceptable outcome. But that wasn't the worst part. Hayes told me something that still haunts my sleep cycles, which was that the solar weapon was just the beginning. While we had been fighting their fleets, human scientists had been developing new technologies based on captured Vorthak equipment, weapons that made the solar beam look primitive. Hayes said that if we ever returned, if we ever threatened humanity again, we would face horrors that would make our current losses seem merciful. Zexai looked directly at Threnody, his compound eyes filled with a fear that had not diminished in 3 years. He showed me blueprints for weapons that could crack planets, devices that could turn stars into bombs, machines that could hunt down fleeing ships across light years of space. The humans had spent 6 months learning everything about war from US, then improved on it beyond our worst nightmares. But the war ended. Your fleet withdrew. My fleet limped home with less than 30 ships out of 300. The survivors were broken, traumatized, unable to function as military personnel. Within 6 months, 3 Vorthak colonies had declared independence, inspired by humanity's example. Within a year, our empire was collapsing from internal rebellion. The silence stretched for long minutes. Threnody saved her notes and studied the broken alien across from her. The humans won through superior technology and tactics, she said finally. No, Zexai's voice was firm despite his obvious exhaustion. They won because they understood something we didn't. War isn't about weapons or ships or strategy. War is about will. The willingness to sacrifice everything for what you believe. The humans had been practicing that willingness for 10,000 years. And now? Now they trade with us. Their merchants dock at our stations, their diplomats attend our councils, their children play with our young in neutral territories. They smile and laugh and act like the war never happened, but I know what lies beneath that friendly surface. Zexai's mandibles clicked one final time. Every human ship still carries weapons, every human colony still trains fighters. Every human child still learns the history of their species' wars. They have joined galactic civilization not as conquered subjects, but as a reminder that some races are too dangerous to fight, too valuable to ignore, and too terrifying to ever underestimate again. Threnody turned off the recording device and sat back in her chair. Is there anything else the tribunal should know? Yes, one final warning. The alien commander's voice carried the weight of absolute certainty. Humans don't just fight wars, they become war itself. Any species that threatens their young will discover that there is no force in the universe more terrible than a human parent with nothing left to lose. We learned that lesson at the cost of an empire. I pray to whatever gods you worship that no one else will be foolish enough to repeat our mistake. The interrogation was over. Zexai was led back to his cell, leaving Threnody alone with her thoughts and the recorded testimony that would warn future generations about the species that had refused to be conquered. Outside the station's viewports, a human merchant vessel docked peacefully, its crew waving cheerfully at the alien workers who helped them unload. But Threnody noticed the ship's hidden weapon ports, the way its captain's eyes constantly scanned for threats, the small memorial plaques honoring those who had died in humanity's war for survival. The humans had indeed joined galactic civilization, but they had done so on their own terms, carrying their capacity for violence like a carefully sheathed blade that could be drawn at any moment if their families were threatened again. A week had passed since the Luna Station testimony. Zexai's condition was deteriorating. The alien commander barely touched his food, and his shell had developed stress fractures that medical staff said were caused by extreme psychological trauma. But Threnody needed to complete the record before he became unable to continue. Your fleet logs show that reinforcements arrived from Earth during the Luna Station siege, she said, activating the recording device. Tell me about the human fleet. That changed everything. Zexhi's forearms trembled in their restraints. They weren't military ships. That was the first thing that confused us. Our sensors detected over 100 vessels approaching from Earth, but none of them matched known warship configurations. Cargo haulers, mining platforms, passenger liners, research vessels, even tourist ships designed for luxury travel. Civilian vessels. We thought so. My tactical officers were relieved. Civilian ships meant non-combatants, refugees fleeing the battle zone. Standard protocol called for allowing them safe passage while we finished securing Luna Station. We even prepared humanitarian aid packages. Threnody made notes as Zexhi continued, his voice growing more strained with each word. The lead ship was called New Frontier, a converted asteroid mining vessel commanded by Captain Sam Rodriguez. Our intelligence files said he was a civilian contractor with no military experience. His ship was designed for cracking open space. Rocks, not combat. We tried to contact him to arrange safe escort away from the battle zone. But Rodriguez wasn't fleeing. No, he was hunting. Zexhi closed his compound eyes as the memory surfaced. Rodriguez responded to our hail by launching every mining drone his ship carried. 60 autonomous units designed for breaking apart. Asteroids, but he had modified them. How? Nuclear charges. Rodriguez had welded atomic warheads to mining equipment, creating swarms of kamikaze weapons that could think and adapt. Each drone was programmed to identify Vorthic ship signatures and destroy itself against our hulls. The alien commander's breathing became labored. My point defense systems weren't designed for that kind of attack. The drones were too small and too numerous. They swarmed over my ships like insects, detonating against critical systems. In 15 minutes, Rodriguez destroyed 3 of my heavy cruisers using mining equipment and bombs. What happened to his ship? We surrounded it with our remaining vessels. 20 warships against 1 converted mining platform. Rodriguez should have surrendered or fled. Instead, he did something that still gives me nightmares. Zexhi paused to drink from his cup, his hands shaking so badly he could barely hold it steady. Rodriguez opened a communication channel to every ship in both fleets. He showed us images of his crew. 37 humans, all volunteers from Earth's mining colonies. Men and women who had signed up to die fighting us. Then he told us about something called the Rodriguez Gambit, which was mutual assured destruction, using industrial equipment. His ship's mining laser was designed to cut through solid rock. Rodriguez had modified it to overload, creating an explosion equivalent to a small star going nova. He gave us 60 seconds to retreat to minimum safe distance. Threnodi's fingers paused over her datapad. He was threatening to destroy his own ship and everything within 100,000 kilometers, including Luna Station, our boarding parties, and half my remaining fleet. Rodriguez said that if we wanted to kill humans, we had to be willing to die with them. Surely you called his bluff. I tried. I ordered my ships to destroy New Frontier before he could detonate, but Rodriguez had help. The other civilian vessels that had been hanging back suddenly revealed their true nature. They weren't refugees. They were weapons platforms crewed by volunteers who had already accepted death. Zexhi's mandibles clicked rapidly as he remembered the chaos that followed. Captain Grace Miller commanded a converted passenger liner. Called Freedom's Dream, she had replaced the entertainment decks with electronic warfare equipment. While we were focused on Rodriguez, Miller was hacking our ship systems. Computer infiltration? She turned our own vessels against us. Miller had studied our network protocols during the previous battles. She inserted code that made our weapons target our own ships, shut down our engines at critical moments, even opened our airlocks in the middle of combat. The interrogation room felt colder as Zexhi continued his testimony. Lieutenant Helen Price was aboard a research vessel that had been converted into a communication platform. She had learned to speak perfect Vorthok in just 3 weeks. Price used our own battle frequencies to coordinate human attacks, issuing false orders that sent my ships into killing zones. Your commanders couldn't distinguish between legitimate orders and enemy interference. Price understood our psychology better than we did. She knew which officers would follow orders without question, which ones could be confused with technical jargon, which ones would hesitate at critical moments. She played us against each other using our own command structure. Threnody leaned forward. What about the mining ship? Did Rodriguez detonate his weapon? He didn't need to. The threat was enough to force my fleet back to safe distance. While we were retreating, the other human ships moved in to support Luna Station. They brought supplies, reinforcements, and something we hadn't expected. Which was hope. The civilians on Luna Station had been fighting for 3 weeks, outnumbered and cut off from support. When they saw Rodriguez's fleet arrive, something changed in their behavior. They became more aggressive, more willing to take risks, more dangerous than ever. Zexhia's voice dropped to barely above a whisper. That was when I realized we were fighting something beyond our understanding. These humans weren't just defending their territory. They were proving something to themselves and to the galaxy. They were showing that their species could not be conquered, could not be intimidated, could not be broken. Your fleet logs show increasing casualties during this period. Every day brought new horrors. Pilot Danny Walsh modified his fighter craft to ram our ships at sublight speeds, using momentum and mass as weapons. Engineer Beth Collins figured out how to overload our shield generators, creating feedback loops that destroyed our own defensive systems. The alien commander looked directly at Threnody, his compound eyes reflecting depths of remembered terror. The humans had turned war into a science. Every battle taught them something new about our technology, our tactics, our weaknesses. They were learning faster than we could adapt. Surely your military experience gave you some advantage. Experience meant nothing when the enemy refused to follow established patterns. Human tactics changed daily, sometimes hourly. They would try something completely new, see if it worked, then either improve it or abandon it for something else. They treated every engagement like an experiment. Zexhia's mandibles clicked nervously. By the end of the second month, my fleet commanders were requesting permission to withdraw. We had lost 60% of our ships to an enemy force that was supposed to be primitive and outgunned. My officers were suffering from what your psychologists would call battle fatigue. But you continued fighting? The Vorthic Empire had never retreated from a conquest. To withdraw would have meant admitting that humans were our equals, maybe our superiors. The High Command ordered me to continue the assault regardless of casualties. So what changed? The humans did something that broke the last of our resolve. Something so terrible, so completely beyond the boundaries of civilized warfare, that even our most hardened veterans couldn't continue fighting. Threnody waited as Zexhi gathered his thoughts, preparing to relive what was clearly his most traumatic memory. Tomorrow I'll tell you about the final horror, about Dr. Rachel Stone and her solar weapon, about the day humans turned their own star into a gun and pointed it at my fleet, about the moment we realized that this species would rather burn the galaxy than accept defeat. 3 days had passed since Zexhi began his testimony. Each night brought the same nightmares, the same screaming voices of his fallen soldiers. Threnody noticed the alien commander had grown thinner, his shell dulled from stress. But she needed the complete story for the tribunal records. Tell me about Luna Station, she said as the recording device activated. Your military reports describe it as the longest siege in Vorthak history. Zexhia's 4 arms hung motionless in their restraints. Luna Station was supposed to be easy. A research facility with 200 civilians. Scientists, engineers, support staff. No military training, no weapons, no defensive systems worth mentioning. My intelligence officers said we could capture it in hours. But you didn't? No, we didn't. His compound eyes closed as the memory surfaced. The station was commanded by Colonel Nina Brooks. We intercepted her background files during our approach. Former Special Forces, decorated combat veteran, but she had been working as a xenobiology researcher for 8 years. We assumed she had gone soft, become weak from civilian life. Threnody made notes on her pad, another miscalculation. The biggest one of all. Brooks had spent those 8 years studying every known alien species in the galaxy. She understood our biology better than most Vorthok doctors. She knew our weaknesses, our fears, our physical limitations. And she had been planning for this moment since the day humans first learned they weren't alone in the universe. HFY paused to drink from his cup, the liquid barely registering in his awareness. I assigned 3,000 Marines to the assault. Elite troops with full battle armor and heavy weapons. The station's hull was civilian-grade, designed for research, not combat. We expected to breach their defenses in the first wave. What happened instead? Brooks turned Luna Station into a trap. The moment our boarding pods attached to their hull, her people released something into the station's atmosphere. A biological agent that Dr. Kevin Chun had created from Earth plants. Toxic spores that attacked respiratory systems. The alien commander's breathing became labored as he remembered. Our species evolved on a world with very clean air. Our lung equivalents are extremely sensitive to foreign particles. Within minutes of entering the station, my Marines were choking on their own body fluids. Chemical warfare. No, biological warfare using common Earth vegetation. Chun was a botanist who had been studying food production for space colonies. He took harmless plants and turned them into weapons in less than 6 hours. Plants that humans could breathe around without protection, but which were deadly poison to us. Threnady's fingers paused over her data pad. How many casualties? In the first day? 400 Marines dead from respiratory failure, but that was just the beginning. Brooks had divided her civilians into hunting teams. They used the station's maintenance tunnels to move around unseen. Passages too small for our soldiers but perfect for humans. HFY's mandibles clicked nervously as he continued. The station's security chief was Amy Foster, a small female who looked like she couldn't hurt anyone. She organized the civilian staff into combat units. Janitors became explosive experts. Cooks became assassins. Even the children were given tasks in their war effort. Children? Human offspring. Brooks had 23 of them on the station. Family members of the research staff? Ages ranging from 8 to 17 years. We expected them to be hidden away, protected. Instead, they became our worst nightmare. The interrogation room fell silent except for the hum of the air recyclers. Threnody waited for HFY to continue, sensing that this memory was particularly painful. The children knew every inch of the station. They could crawl through air ducts, hide in spaces our armor couldn't fit, appear and disappear like ghosts. They would drop explosive devices on our patrols, then vanish before we could respond. One of them, a female named Jenny, who couldn't have been more than 12 years old, killed 6 of my Marines with improvised bombs made from cleaning supplies. The adults allowed children to fight. The adults couldn't stop them. That was when we realized we weren't fighting a military organization. We were fighting a family. Every human on that station was protecting every other human. The children weren't being forced to fight. They were volunteering. HFY's voice dropped to barely above a whisper. On day 12 of the siege, I received a transmission from a boy named Alex. He was maybe 14 years old, with brown hair and blue eyes. He spoke perfect Vorthok, which should have been impossible for someone his age. What did he say? He thanked me for teaching his people about alien technology. He said the children had been studying our equipment every time we left bodies behind. They had figured out how to operate our weapons, how to bypass our armor systems, how to turn our own tools against us. The alien commander paused, his breathing becoming more labored. Then he showed me what they had built. A bomb made from our own power cells, powerful enough to destroy an entire section of the station. He said they had placed 12 of these devices throughout Luna Station, and if we didn't leave immediately, they would detonate all of them. Suicide, mutual destruction. Alex told me that humans would rather die than surrender their children to slavery. He said the adults had voted and they had chosen to destroy the station rather than allow us to capture it. But then he offered me a deal. Threnody leaned forward. What kind of deal? Safe passage for my remaining troops in exchange for leaving the station intact. Alex said the children wanted to keep studying our technology and they needed the research facilities operational. He gave me 1 hour to decide. What did you do? I tried to call his bluff. These were human children, not trained soldiers. I ordered my remaining 1,500 Marines to storm the main laboratory where most of the civilians had gathered. I thought they would surrender when faced with overwhelming force. Zexhi's compound eyes reflected the overhead lights, showing depths of remembered horror. The laboratory was defended by a cook named Pete Williams, a large human male who worked in the station's kitchen. He had no military training, no advanced weapons, just kitchen knives and an understanding of anatomy that Dr. Chun had taught him. A cook? A cook who killed 12 of my elite Marines in hand-to-hand combat. He moved through my soldiers like they were standing still, striking at weak points in their armor with precision that would have impressed our best assassins. Williams died from his wounds, but not before he had blocked the only entrance to the laboratory. The silence stretched for long minutes. Threnody found herself holding her breath, waiting for the rest of the story. That was when I understood what we were really fighting. Not just humans, but the concept of humanity itself. Every person on that station, from the smallest child to the oldest researcher, was willing to die to protect the others. They had turned their research facility into a fortress, their scientific knowledge into weapons, their love for each other into the most dangerous military force I had ever encountered. So you withdrew. I had no choice. After 18 days of siege, I had lost over 2,000 Marines to 200 human civilians. My troops were demoralized, terrified of entering any space that might contain humans. The station's defenders were down to maybe 50 people, but they were still fighting, still killing my soldiers, still refusing to surrender. Zexhi looked directly at Threnody. On day 21, Colonel Brooks contacted me personally. She was wounded, exhausted, but her voice was steady. She told me that Luna Station had been broadcasting everything to Earth. Every battle, every death, every moment of our siege was being recorded and transmitted to the human homeworld. Why? So other humans could learn from their sacrifice? Brooks said that even if we killed everyone on Luna Station, their deaths would teach other humans how to fight us. She said we could win this battle, but we were creating the knowledge that would destroy us in the next one. The alien commander's mandibles clicked rapidly. That was the moment I realized we had already lost the war. The humans weren't just fighting us. They were studying us, learning from us, becoming more dangerous with every encounter. Tomorrow I'll tell you about what happened when their main fleet arrived. About Captain Sam Rodriguez and his converted mining ships. About weapons that shouldn't exist and tactics that defied every law of civilized warfare. The next morning came too soon for Zexhi. The artificial lights in his cell had dimmed for only 4 hours before the guards arrived. His sleep had been filled with burning ships and screaming voices, the same nightmares that had plagued him. For 3 years, Threnody was already waiting in the interrogation room when they brought him in. She had 2 cups of warm liquid on the table, one designed for his biology and one for hers. The gesture was kind, but Zexhi barely noticed. His mind was still trapped in the past, reliving the day everything went wrong. You mentioned Luna Station yesterday, Threnody said as the restraints clicked into place around his arms. But first tell me about the initial assault on Earth itself. Your records show the Third Fleet began orbital bombardment, 72 hours after the human rejection of your ultimatum. Zexhi focused slowly on the present. Luna Station came later. The real nightmare began with Earth's moon. We thought it would be simple. Destroy their defensive installations, land-ground forces, secure the population centers. Standard conquest protocol. He paused to sip the warm liquid. It tasted like home, before the war, before the shame. Admiral Morrison had moved his command ship to Luna Station by then. a research facility orbiting Earth's moon. We assumed he was trying to protect civilian scientists. It seemed like a reasonable tactical choice, but you were wrong. We were wrong about everything. Zek's mandibles clicked nervously. My fleet commanders were confident. 300 ships against maybe 30 human vessels. Our weapons could punch holes through mountains. Their missiles used chemical propulsion and metal warheads. The odds were so overwhelming that some of my officers suggested we accept surrender immediately to save time. Threnody made notes on her pad. What changed? The humans did something impossible. While we were positioning our ships for the attack, they were learning. Admiral Morrison had a chief engineer named Lisa Hayes, a small female with dark hair and green eyes. She looked like she could barely lift one of their primitive tools. Zek's closed his eyes, remembering the intercepts his intelligence officers had recorded. Hayes, working without sleep for 3 days straight, surrounded by dismantled Vorthic technology they had somehow acquired. Her voice had been calm and focused as she directed her teams, speaking in technical terms that his translators couldn't fully process. She reverse-engineered our shield technology in 72 hours, he continued. Something our best scientists said was impossible without decades of study. But Hayes wasn't just copying our designs, she was improving them, making them work with human manufacturing methods. How did they acquire Vorthic technology to study? That was our first real lesson about humans. During our initial demonstrations of power, we had destroyed 3 of their orbital platforms. Standard procedure called for vaporizing all debris to prevent scavenging. But the human platforms had escape pods. Zek's voice grew quieter. We thought the pods were fleeing. We let them go because destroying escape pods violated galactic warfare conventions. We didn't realize each pod was collecting samples of our weapons fire, pieces of our hull plating that had been damaged in the exchange, even fragments of our shield emitters. The humans were studying you while you were attacking them. Yes. While we were following proper military protocol, they were treating the encounter like a learning experience. By the time we began our main assault, they had adapted their weapons to penetrate our shields and modified their ships to resist our energy beams. Threnody leaned forward. But surely your numerical advantage was still decisive. Numbers mean nothing when your enemy refuses to follow the rules. Zek's forearms trembled slightly. The first wave of our attack should have ended the war. 50 heavy cruisers against Earth's remaining defense fleet. Instead, it became a nightmare. He paused, lost in memory. The bridge of the inevitable. Victory had been filled with confident chatter as they approached Earth's moon. His tactical officers were already discussing occupation procedures and resource allocation. The humans had maybe 15 ships left, cobbled together from civilian vessels and obsolete military hardware. Captain Ryan Parker commanded one of their ships, the Liberty. It was old even by human standards, armed with projectile weapons that belonged in a museum. When our fleet opened fire, his ship should have been vaporized in the first volley, but it wasn't. No. Parker did something that violated every principle of civilized warfare. Instead of trying to match our firepower or retreat to a defensive position, he broadcast something to every ship in both fleets. Images from human history, videos of their wars. Zek's breathing became labored as he remembered the transmission. Humans in primitive aircraft, diving their burning planes into enemy vessels. Soldiers charging across open ground into devastating fire. Warriors fighting hand-to-hand with bladed weapons, refusing to retreat even when overwhelmed. We thought he was showing us their primitive past to demonstrate how far they had evolved. My communications officer was laughing at images of humans fighting with swords and spears. Then Parker spoke directly to me. What did he say? He said that every image in his transmission showed humans fighting enemies with superior weapons and technology. He said that for 10,000 years his species had been the underdogs in every conflict. Then he smiled the same way Admiral Morrison had smiled. Threnody waited patiently as Zek's gathered his thoughts. The alien commander's compound eyes were unfocused, staring at memories that refused to fade. Parker told me that humans had been preparing for this moment their entire evolutionary history. Every war, every battle, every conflict had been practiced for the day they would face an enemy from the stars. He said we weren't fighting a military force. We were fighting the end result of 10 millennia of natural selection that favored the most stubborn, most resourceful, most dangerously creative survivors. Then what happened? Then he rammed his ship into my heavy cruiser domination. The words came out in a rush, as if speaking them quickly would lessen their impact. At full velocity. No warning, no tactical considerations, no attempt at self-preservation. He just turned his ancient vessel into a kinetic weapon and destroyed one of our most powerful warships. That's suicide. That's human. Zexhias' voice was barely above a whisper. His crew had 30 seconds to reach escape pods. Most of them didn't make it. Parker died with his ship, along with 200 of his people. But he also killed 800 of my Marines and took out our most advanced weapons platform. Threnity's fingers had stopped moving over her datapad. One ship? One ship. Crewed by humans who chose death over surrender. While we were still processing what had happened, the rest of their fleet was adapting Parker's tactics. Within an hour, they had turned every civilian vessel, every cargo hauler, every transport ship into a potential kamikaze weapon. Zexhi looked directly at Threnody, his compound eyes reflecting the overhead lights. That was when we realized we weren't fighting a normal species. We were fighting something that had evolved beyond our understanding of rational behavior. Something that treated mutual destruction not as a last resort, but as a valid tactical option. Certainly your commanders adjusted their strategy after this. How do you adjust your strategy when the enemy is willing to die to kill you, when every ship might be a bomb? When their civilians volunteer for suicide missions? Zexhias' mandibles clicked rapidly. By the end of the first day, we had lost 12 ships to ramming attacks. By the end of the first week, my fleet commanders were afraid to engage individual human vessels because we never knew which ones were piloted by people who had already accepted death. The interrogation room fell silent except for the hum of the air recyclers. Threnody saved her notes and studied the broken alien across from her. Tomorrow, Zexhi whispered, I'll tell you about Luna Station. About what humans can do when they have time to prepare. About Colonel Nina Brooks and her scientists who turned a research facility into hell itself. The metal chair felt cold against Zexhi's broken shell. His forearms hung limp in the energy restraints, the bright lights above making his compound eyes water. The interrogation room on Kepler 7 station smelled of disinfectant and fear. 3 years had passed since the war ended, but the nightmares still came every sleep cycle. Across the table sat Investigator Threnody, her blue skin gleaming under the harsh lights. The Centaurian female had been asking questions for hours, her voice calm and patient. She represented the Galactic Council's War Crimes Tribunal, documenting the fall of the Vorthic Empire for the historical records. Tell me about Earth, Threnody said, her 6 fingers dancing over the recording device. Tell me about the humans. Zexhias' mandibles clicked nervously. Even now, speaking that word made his blood run cold. He had commanded the 3rd Fleet of the mighty Vorthic Empire. His ships had burned the skies of 40 worlds. Entire species had fled at the mention of his name. Yet here he sat, a broken prisoner, haunted by memories of small pink creatures who refused to die. You want to know about humans, he whispered, his voice rough from years of screaming in his sleep. Everyone wants to know about humans. The council, the media, even my own people before they cast me out. They all ask the same question. How did the greatest military force in the galaxy lose to a species that had barely learned to leave their own planet? Threnody leaned forward, her large black eyes reflecting the overhead lights. The preliminary reports suggest your forces held significant technological advantages. Your ships outnumbered theirs 10 to 1. Your weapons were centuries ahead of their development. Yet within 18 months, the Vorthic Empire sued for peace. Some say it was the fastest military collapse in recorded galactic history. A bitter laugh escaped from Zexhi's throat, more of a hiss than actual humor. Technological advantages, superior numbers. We had everything except understanding. We thought we knew what war was. We thought we understood survival. The humans taught us we knew nothing. He closed his eyes, and immediately the memories came flooding back. The bridge of his flagship, the inevitable victory, the calm confidence he had felt as they entered the Sol system, Earth hanging before them like a blue jewel, unprotected and innocent, his tactical officers reporting minimal defensive installations, primitive atomic weapons, ships that barely qualified as military vessels. Standard procedure, he continued, opening his eyes to meet Threnodi's gaze. We had done it 1,000 times before. Enter system, demand surrender, demonstrate superior firepower if needed. Most species submitted immediately. The smart ones joined our empire willingly. The stubborn ones we conquered in days. But not the humans. No, not the humans. Zexhi's voice dropped to barely above a whisper. We sent our standard ultimatum. Surrender unconditionally or face extinction. We gave them 24 hours to respond, which was more generous than usual. My communications officer thought it was funny. A whole day for such primitive creatures to accept the inevitable. Threnody made notes on her datapad. What was their response? Silence. For 23 hours and 57 minutes, complete silence. We assumed they were in chaos, their governments collapsing as they realized the hopelessness of their situation. Then, 3 minutes before the deadline, we received a transmission from something called the United Earth Defense Force. Zexhi paused, his breathing becoming labored as the memory intensified. Even now, he could see Admiral Jake Morrison's face on the communication screen. The human had looked so ordinary, so unremarkable. Short brown hair, pale skin, eyes the color of Earth's sky. Nothing about him suggested the nightmare that was about to unfold. The human admiral was polite, Zexhi continued. He thanked us for our generous offer but respectfully declined. He said humanity preferred to remain independent. Then he smiled. He smiled? That was our first warning. What kind of species smiles when facing extinction? My tactical officer suggested the humans might be mentally defective. Perhaps their brains had evolved incorrectly, making them incapable of recognizing superior force. It seemed logical at the time. Threnodi's fingers stopped moving over her datapad. What happened next? We opened fire on their military installations as planned. Precise strikes designed to demonstrate our power while minimizing casualties. We destroyed 3 orbital defense platforms and a small fleet of their primitive vessels. Standard intimidation. Tactics that had worked on hundreds of worlds. But not on Earth? No, not on Earth. Zexhi's mandibles clicked rapidly, a sign of extreme distress among his species. Within 6 hours, they had analyzed our weapon signatures and shield frequencies. Within 12 hours, they had modified their missiles to penetrate our defenses. Within 18 hours, they were shooting back. The silence in the room stretched for long minutes. Threnody waited patiently, understanding that some memories needed time to surface. Finally, Zexhi continued, his voice hollow with remembered terror. Their first counterattack wasn't military. It was something we had never encountered before. They flooded our communication channels with images, pictures from their history. Humans fighting with primitive weapons, charging into certain death. Soldiers throwing themselves on explosive devices to save their companions. Pilots crashing their burning aircraft into enemy ships rather than retreat. Psychological warfare, Threnody noted. We didn't understand it then. We thought they were trying to frighten us with their primitive brutality. My intelligence officer laughed at the images of humans fighting with metal blades and chemical explosives. How could such crude displays intimidate a species that commanded energy weapons and faster-than-light travel? Zexhi's forearms trembled in their restraints. We didn't realize they were showing us what they truly were. Not a military force? Not even a civilization in the way we understood the term. They were showing us that we were about to fight. An entire species that had spent 10,000 years perfecting one single skill, which was killing. The word hung in the air like a physical presence. Every human was a warrior. Not trained, not conscripted, but born to it. They didn't fight because they had to. They fought because that's what humans do. It's what they've always done, what they'll always do. Threnody saved her notes and prepared to ask another question, but Zexhai was no longer looking at her. His compound eyes stared at something far beyond the interrogation room walls, something that existed only in memory and nightmare. "You want to know about humans," he whispered. "Tomorrow I'll tell you about Luna Station, about Colonel Nina Brooks, and her 200 researchers who held off 3,000 of my Marines for 37 days. Tonight, let me try to forget."